Zion Williamson is out indefinitely after a CT scan revealed a fracture of his left ring finger, and no, the way that he's been officiated had nothing to do with this. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Dr. Brian Sutterer, and this is your #1 source for learning about the unique medical side of the world of sports. Let's dive right into what happened with Zion's injury here. You guys know what to do if you enjoy these videos. This injury occurred in their recent game against the Warriors in the third quarter, and Zion went up here in the lane to put up this layup, and it was basically whenever he went back up to get the rebound where we can see all of this mess of hands up there. And one of these is Zion's, and this is when he injured that finger. The Pelicans report specified it was his left ring finger, and if we look at all this mess of hands, this hand right here is Zion's. This is going to be his pinky, his fourth finger. We can see his thumb and probably his index finger. And what I want you to do is just look and see here how much that finger gets bent right there in that position. So here his ring finger is ulnarly deviated because it's moving out towards the ulna and is also being bent backwards a little bit. If you look especially relative to his pinky that's in a pretty normal neutral position, that ring finger is bent pretty severely back. So hyperextended, meaning back up this way, and ulnarly deviated. And it's particularly at this joint where the finger meets the hand, an area we call the MCP joint. Now I can prove to you guys that this is Zion's hand because here if we follow it all the way down right there, you can see him kind of clenching that fist, making a hand there as he's in pain. And so then if we just follow that back up, look up where his hand comes, we still have it right here. Keep following it up, there's his hand. And finally, now you can see that fourth finger is in more of a neutral position. But if we keep going through that play, that's where you can see it smashed all the way back under from when he was going up to get this rebound. So essentially him going back up to get this rebound is what jammed his finger in such a way that it resulted in a fracture there of that ring finger. Maybe you could argue a foul should have been called beforehand, but it wasn't like Zion got hit on his hand here and that's what caused the fracture. This was purely because of how he went up and sort of abnormally jammed that finger up against the ball. If you look at our biodigital anatomy tool here, I want to just point out what we would classify as the hand versus the fingers. So of course, thumb side over here, and then we're going to go all the way across. So this guy is going to be our fourth or ring finger. It's best to call it ring finger because if you say fourth, some people might not know which one you're referencing as the first. So we would say thumb, index finger, middle finger, ring finger, and small finger to really make sure we're describing the right one. But this whole group of bones right here are going to be the metacarpals. Those are what sit in the palm of your hand. And then everything up here are going to be the phalanges or the finger. So when the Pelicans say fractured ring finger, to me that implies that it's one of these three bones as opposed to this metacarpal down in the hand. Now we don't know from the report which of these three is injured. I can say that based on the way they were examining his hand and the position that his finger was put in, I would suspect that it's closer down here to the base or the lower portion of what we would call the proximal phalanx, so the one that's closest to the rest of the body. The cameras caught the medical team doing a little bit of their exam here, and what they're specifically doing in this position is stressing that MCP joint, so the joint between the metacarpal and the phalanx, this bump that you feel on the back of the hand. As you'll notice, they're doing it with the fingers a little bit flexed. If you examine that joint with the fingers extended and try to move it side to side, you aren't really stressing the joint. You're causing a lot of movement in that metacarpal. And so when we examine that joint, we always want to make sure we do it with the finger in a little bit of flexion because that stabilizes it in such a way that we can properly stress in both directions to look at the stability of that joint. So you can see that little side-to-side movement that they're doing to examine that joint. Prognosis and management depends entirely on #1, where is the fracture in terms of if it's near the joint or in the shaft of the bone, and also, of course, how displaced or complex is the fracture. And so it's hard to give an exact prognosis here without knowing what the images looked like in those specific details. Of course, we remember from that game, Zion came back and played. So theoretically, that means he got x-rays, the x-rays looked normal, and then they let him come back and play. It was only the CT scan, which is much more detailed at looking at the bones, where they finally found the fracture. This is just an example of a hand x-ray, but I want to show you how difficult it can be to pick up small little hand fractures, particularly if they're near the joint. We can get different side views here, but there can be tiny little fracture lines that run through the areas near these joints that honestly, we don't pick up on x-ray. That's why we do these other advanced tests like CT scans to get more precise detail. So the fact that Zion seemingly had normal x-rays, came back into play, and now has had a CT scan, that does raise some concern for me that it's near the joint. Also, when we talk about location, anything that's intra-articular, meaning inside the joint, is going to be more serious because it involves the cartilage that covers that area of the bone. But I really want to get across the point that hand and finger fractures can have a very wide range of possibilities in terms of what has to be done. Jeff Stotts shared some great numbers here, pointing out that the average time missed if a player avoids surgery is just over 5 games, but then up to about 15 games if you need surgery. So pretty wide range, especially for where the Pelicans are at in their season. Expect more details in the coming days. Hopefully Zion can avoid surgery and maybe still play this year, especially if the Pelicans get into the playoffs, but it's going to be really tight. Let me know as always any questions or comments down below, and until next time, we'll see you later. Bye.